Sunday, November 7th, 2016, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. I'm going to make a summary of the November ALTA report, which stands for Asymmetric Linguistic Trends Analysis, made by Cliff High with his WebBot technology. Basically, Cliff High from halfpasthuman.com. He scours the internet for language, and he uses something called a WebBot. They're little WebBots that go and pick up language in all different languages, like be it English, Russian, German, and he comes out with a report where he tries to interpret the data that the WebBot brings from the internet. His premise, Cliff High, is that humans are psychic without knowing, and he tries to make predictions, forecasts, based on the data that is being grabbed out of the internet by the WebBot. So he comes out usually with an ALTA report every month. His November report has just come out. It costs $15. He's also said that he will give a refund if you don't like what you read, if you think it's too negative. He says usually in English, and especially in the internet, there's a tendency for people to be more critical and negative. So he said he will refund you, very quickly if you don't like the report. It's a long one, so I'm going to start right now. And I'll start with what he says here in the report. He says that the majority of the report is focused and devoted to USA pop in the market. And he also says data suggests USA pop leads the rest of the world to the, through the death of the Federal Reserve US dollar paradigm. And he says also there's not enough data to know whether the central banking warfare model is going to end, but he says there's clear potential for that to happen within the next few decades. So we're going to start with the Terra entity, which is basically the world we live in, the Earth. And he says, and I quote, data sets show earthquakes from late 2017 to 2040. And he says a lot of damage over the next 30 years. But by 2040, these earthquakes will not be called abnormal anymore. They'll be the, normal. He says also there's a lot of data sets about Antarctica, about glacier quakes and how that's going to disrupt river systems because of the ice blocks moving from the Antarctica. Yeah, that will disrupt river systems. That will disrupt the currents, ocean currents. That will also disrupt the jet stream. And he's saying that this coming winter for the Northern Hemisphere, 2016, 2017, there will be extreme snow in some areas, and that there will also be snow in 2017 as late summer. In some places it will be warm, but you will see some snow around. Really strange. So let's have a look here. Global pop. He talks about the global pop in general, and he talks about a term called flush. And he says he sees a lot of innovation within the global pop in the next 5 years, and that there will be cooperation between Africa and Russia. He says the USA pop will get involved, but later on, in 4 years' time, though, the USA pop will be behind this flush or innovation, technological innovation. So now European pop war, he calls data sets. Basically, he's saying that the core peoples, the indigenous people of Europe, are going to take on, what they call the invaders. I guess that could be the refugees. And there also that he also says that there's going to be a breakdown of control by the ruling elite class. That's European pop war data set. And I just like to remind everyone, I'm just giving you a summary of this. I'm just reporting it. I might not agree with everything Cliff High says, so please don't make, you can comment whatever you want, but please don't make offensive comments and swear at me, because some people have done that. And I don't need that. You just comment. You can disagree with me, but be civil. So Canada Pop, not much in the Canada Pop, but he's saying that there's gaining new sets for discovery of flexible minerals, and that these data sets are starting to show in the short term. So I think in the previous report, he said Canada will do well because of all these discoveries. Deutsche Pop, or German Pop, he says, and I quote, "Rage and street wars." And this won't be against, the invaders. It will be anger and rage over the powers that be, or the ruling elite, with, the collapse of the Federal Reserve dollar system that impacts Germany greatly. He says it will take maybe a generation for the German pop to calm down and, lose the anger and rage, and that the German pop will turn towards Russia. So there will be a lot closer cooperation with the Russians instead of maybe the U.S. elite. Not the USA, the average American. They're not angry. Germans won't be angry at the average American, but at the powers that be in the U.S. and Germany. Franco-Pop, or French, the French population. He says data sets showing collapse of retirement system due to the breakdown of the Federal Reserve banking fiat money system. It impacts Western Europe. He says the hyperinflationary shock and the credit squeeze, showing that the French government will collapse, and also the corporations. He doesn't go on more about the Franco-Pop because he says there's so much data, but basically it's showing, big problems for their retirement system. China Pop, the gist of it is that he says China will inherit the world fiscally due to the the meltdown of the Federal Reserve dollar system. They'll be buying properties, all over the world because they're the major creditor. That's the China Pop. Saudi Pop, Saudi Arabia Pop. I quote, "The data sets are showing that the House of Saud tries to defend itself in the court of public opinion. They're still going to have a lot of trouble, internal troubles and external problems. But he says that the House of Saud will come to their senses, and by sometime in 2017, they will announce no more oil for dollars." So that's the Saudi Pop. UK Pop. So he says that the data set is showing financial chaos and emerging political upheaval. He says the crash of the dollar system will hurt London a lot, and he uses the term end of business in London. And he says the data set are showing pending information dump. Was that like more WikiLeaks dump on the British establishment and their minions? I don't know if it's WikiLeaks. Establishment, he uses royals as well. So data, pending information dump. And for the UK Pop, he says popping of the growth bubble or debt system will hit the UK very hard. Central London especially. That corresponds to the previous reports. And he says that once the fiat currencies start failing, that within a year, Central London property will lose 50% of its value. He also says that the data set for London are showing gold being moved out of London and runs to gold. I guess London is the major trading center for wholesale gold. And he says data sets show 90% devaluation of the fiat currencies. And that the temporal marker for that will be when there are rumors of gold being removed from London. So he's basically saying once you hear language about gold being removed from London, that you should see some kind of devaluation of the fiat currencies. So now I'll go into USA Pop, and for the USA Pop, I will be reading some of the parts of his report because there's so much that it's more interesting for me to read some of the interesting comments or interpretations that he's made. But the major thing that I think is important here is that he says, data suggests Trump triumphs over Hillary by a margin a margin so large as to seem to be labeled as ridiculous in modern American politics. And he also says confusion reigns in USA Pop as a result of the presidential election. So I'm gonna go here on in the report and read some of this. Of course, I'll quote these. And he's part of the USA Pop. He says, the impairment of the global banking system has some very interesting side effects. Many are being referenced here in USA Pop. These side effects are indicating that the first layers to float off the failing banks, also defined as become exposed and non-supported, will be the corruption and malfeasance at officialdom levels, bank and all, employees and all. These sets are indicating that tens of millions of banking employees will be fired, dismissed, or abandoned. That's part of the USA Pop. So, let's see. He's also saying here, baby boomers are kicked out of their pensions and homes as the health of the economy reaches the point of government failure. These are all interpretations of the data. So it doesn't mean it's all going to happen. He's not 100% correct, but it helps to see what is out there. And it says the data set are indicating that the police will be brought out in force with their armor and their armored vehicles to protect the banks and banksters. So a lot of confusion, it seems. And it says here, others of the millennial generation within USA Pop are indicated to rise to public prominence as a result of the participation in the global innovation wave. That's the global pop I spoke about. So he says here, for USA Pop, the data are describing a very bad and very long year. The data sets are showing that the Fury period for USA Pop will be marked as in tattooed with what really can be best described as the seismic event. I guess that's the result of the election. He also says college degree deflation in the sense that universities and the expectations of life post-graduation are going to disappear as a guiding path within the American social narrative over these next few years of the unfolding of the crimes of the power structure. So let's have a look here. Going down here, the report, I really recommend people purchase this if you really want to know more, but I'm just giving you what I think is the most important about the USA Pop at the moment. So and now here towards the end he says, these coming years here in USA Pop are forecast to include really tough times as we learn to rapidly rediscover very old ways of doing things, then to reinvent them around either modern resources or the lack thereof. These are the Cuba-like years in which American youth are going to be educated by universe in ways of doing things simply as we must. It says, and he says, yes, the struggle will be economic, but at its core is the rotting empire stink that will have to be dealt with through the opening wounds to let out the pus, and the incising of the infected flesh. This will be the next 2 years politically here in USA Pop. Prepare for it now. So that's USA Pop. And he goes on to say, but not to worry, the really long-term data shows that by 2050, it will be cool to be a Norte Americano, or a North American again. Mostly the data is showing this to be true exactly because the decisions that we will all make, that's right. I'm speaking to you over these next 10 years. So markets entity, and I'm going to read it out as well. There's quite a bit. He goes on to say the markets entity has new primary supporting sets heading by pinching off. These sets are describing a nearly instantaneous seizure reaction in which the arteries of funding within USA Pop financial structures are pinched off abruptly. The data is arguing that this is the unintended consequences of the Trump victory as well as the confusion after the Trump victory. So what's he saying here? What else? Another interesting thing for the viewers, it says the dollar problems will be emerging over the rest of November and December will not only drive gold and silver into growing premiums, as well as expressed fears of developing shortages. Note that the sets are also reporting that not only the language of fear will be discussing the fears of shortages. The data also forecasts actual shortages as panic to own, fire starts to grip the global precious metals market as USA Pop mental instability and confusion continues further into the end of the year. So Bitcoin, it says the data sets are referencing several aspect attributes sets that are going to be tying Bitcoin and precious metals as both are heading up as currencies are going down, as the fiat currencies are going down. So like Bitcoin and precious metals kind of interacting together. What else? Let's see here. The markets entities has gained new growth within sets that are showing the Federal Reserve is to hit a deflationary wall, which will be the Chinese Great Wall of forced devaluation. This is showing as causing a deflationary effect that will produce a rapid 60% reduction in the purchasing power of the US dollar. So I'm just going through here the markets entity. Oh, this is quite interesting here. The data sets are coming up to continue to bring up panic in the central bank's view of the markets for 2017. This data is forecasting that the markets will be exhibiting bizarre behavior, so the panic will be having some impact on the trading activities. However, panic does not show up within the data set until late November post-election. For Bitcoin here, this new processing is producing linguistic structures for Bitcoin that provide details for BTC as it is described as climbing into power position. It says past interpretations have had successful manifestations as in when both gold, silver went upscale by tens from their pricing in 2001. So it says here, these sets are within supporting chain of data for $13,000 Bitcoin, as well as 80,808 yuan to the Bitcoin. So yeah, that's the market's entity. He ends up by saying in the market's entity, and I quote, while there will be parts of the gold and silver rush globally that will be sea-based, and the new frontier for oceans is showing up in markets as being minerals and energy. These are both not good signs, as they have each separately displaced fishing as primary commercial objectives within our language sets. So, there will be such a rush to own gold and silver that people will mine the seabed. And he goes on to finish saying, further problems for the outside USA continent dollar-based world are showing as springing up during winter as Federal Reserve Bank and its system becomes visibly incapable of coping with emerging events. So the conclusion, I come to his conclusion here, Cliff High makes at the end of this report. And it's quite interesting, and I quote, he says, humanity, especially that part living under the tyranny of the Federal Reserve dollar empire, is being set in motion. The motion is going to affect all of the Western banking-dominated world as money becomes redefined, and along with it, character and morals will be exposed for all to examine. And he goes on to say, this is his conclusion about USA Pop. USA Pop is going to go inside, I guess, isolate itself in a manner not seen on this planet since the 1830s. Once the Whig Party morphed into the Republicans in the war between the states in the 1860s, USA Pop was falling under control of the globalist powers that be. So he says, the brief respite of the anti-Masonic party of the late 1800s and the 1918 collapse of globalism via the League of Nations were minor recesses in the schooling of USA Pop by their internationalist masters. And he says, now our data sets are forecasting that USA Pop is going to cocoon itself for a number of years as the dollar death process takes place. It will be seen in hindsight to have taken just over about 10 years for USA Pop to end its chrysalis. That means, I guess, change, and to emerge as part of the new world population. So, and he says the data shows it to be very challenging and worthwhile 10 years ahead. So a lot of change, and very interesting report. As I said, it's $15. You can pay debit card, PayPal. He accepts Bitcoin as well, and he's refunding if you don't like the report, if you think it's too negative. So yeah, this is the WebBot report, or the ALTA report for November 2016. If you enjoy my summary, please give me a thumbs up. Share my video with friends or colleagues or family. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do. And if you'd like to donate to my channel, there's some links below in the description. Take care and have a good rest of the weekend. Take care. Bye.